the issue with the WNBA, and I'm going to repeat a mantra. It is the most unlikable league and culture in all of sports by far. And I'm talking from the players to some of the ownership, to all the media members, to the podcasters, to those who defend it. It's the most unlikable league in the whole wide world. And this is just another piece of evidence to support that statement.
The WNBA was meant to have discovered its hero, a once-in-a-lifetime talent. A familiar name even before she stepped onto a professional floor. An athlete so magnetic, she packed stadiums and shattered TV ratings the instant she showed up. Yet rather than lifting her up, the league has done something almost unthinkable. It has turned its greatest blessing into its biggest burden. The truth is harsh. Beneath the highlight clips and cheerful press talk sits a league so divided, so consumed by its inner politics that many now call the most unlikable culture in all sports. And the proof for that charge doesn't come from haters or rival leagues. It comes from how they've handled the one player who could have locked down their future. Caitlin Clark's choice to walk away from a life-changing multi-million-dollar offer wasn't some accident. It wasn't a misstep a few reporters rushed to label it. And it definitely wasn't about loyalty to a league that pays her crumbs while cashing in on her name. It was something far sharper. A setup crafted so neatly that the WNBA stepped straight into it with eyes wide open. And now they can't claw their way out. Today, we're pulling back the cover on the story the league prays you'll never hear. A story of betrayal, hidden motives, and one star who outsmarted an entire institution. Because what Caitlin Clark just pulled off might not only force the WNBA to face its corruption, it could tear the whole system apart. To grasp the genius of Clark's play, you first need to grasp the bait. And it was flawless. A brand new league called Unrivaled had risen, built by WNBA standouts Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier. And when they came knocking at Clark's door, they didn't show up empty-handed. They came with what they proudly called a Lionel Messi-style proposal. Not just a contract, an empire. The figures alone were shocking. Over $1 million for only 8 to 10 weeks of basketball. That's more than 13 times Clark's official rookie paycheck in the WNBA, a laughable $76,535. To put that in plain terms, she draws sellout crowds, record TV audiences, and millions in ad dollars for the league. Yet, she takes home less than a mid-level office worker. That isn't just unfair, it's disrespectful. But the offer didn't stop at the paycheck. With the salary came something even more powerful. Equity, ownership, a slice of the whole league. For the first time, Clark wasn't treated as replaceable talent. She was being handed real power, something the WNBA never dared to give her. Even one of Unrivaled's own founders admitted what everyone already knew. Caitlin Clark was being exploited. They flat out said she should be one of the highest paid athletes on the planet for the sheer numbers she delivers. That wasn't guesswork. It was an admission. Proof the WNBA was happy to market her face while refusing to reward her fairly. So when this deal was laid out, the expectation was clear. She'd sign. Of course she would. Why wouldn't she? More money, more respect, more control. It was the perfect escape hatch from a league that used her like a cash machine while dropping her pocket change.
Another reason why Caitlin Clark needs to flee the WNBA. It's a political organization. They're not serious about business. They don't care about traditional sports fans. It's a little cult that puts out little political statements. Everybody wears vote t-shirts. They don't care about making money. They don't care really about building up this league and making it profitable. They're a charity. She needs to flee the WNBA and start her own.
But that's exactly what made her next step so crushing, because instead of snatching the bait, she walked away. When Caitlin Clark turned down the deal, the entire sports world froze in shock. This wasn't just surprising, it was unthinkable. Who says no to $1 million paycheck and ownership in a whole new league? Who turns down financial freedom, real equity, and an escape from a system that clearly resents them? The media scrambled for answers. Some insisted she wanted more rest. Others claimed she needed to stay locked in on her rookie season. A few pointed at her sponsorships, saying she didn't need the extra cash. But every single one of those takes missed the truth. Clark's refusal wasn't about being tired. It wasn't about brand money. And it definitely wasn't about loyalty to the WNBA. It was about delivering a message. By rejecting what looked like the perfect chance, Clark showed the world she wasn't chasing paychecks. She was chasing power. This wasn't convenience. It was confrontation. While the WNBA wasted energy on politics, Clark was playing an entirely different game, one far bigger than basketball. She didn't just turn down Unrivaled's offer. She converted that rejection into a weapon. She walked away from millions to shine a spotlight on something much larger, the broken, hostile system she was stuck in. And that's why her decision hit like a flare in the night, because suddenly her story wasn't only about basketball anymore. It wasn't about wins, losses, or even contracts. It was about something that caught the eye of people far beyond sports. Something strong enough to shake the league at its core. And what was that signal? It was the sound of the federal government stepping in. The second Caitlin Clark turned down that offer, her story left the sports section and exploded into the national spotlight. Because suddenly it wasn't just about a young star walking away from millions. It was about mounting proof that she was being targeted, exploited, and silenced inside the very league built on her back. And that's when the government got involved. A former White House official, Sean Mullen, went public calling for a federal probe into the WNBA. His charge? That Clark was living through a textbook hostile workplace. Not just rough defense. Not just rookie hazing, but a calculated campaign of abuse that the league tolerated, if not encouraged. And the evidence is staggering. In her very first season, she's already been hit with 6 flagrant fouls, a total some veterans don't rack up over entire careers. She's been blindsided by intentional body checks, shoved to the floor by Kennedy Carter, and taken out hard by Marina Mabrey. 10 games lost. 10 from injuries that never should have happened if the league protected its most valuable star. Even rivals can't deny it anymore. Phoenix Mercury guard Sophie Cunningham flat out said it. The WNBA's biggest star is not being protected. Think about that. Not a fan, not a commentator. A competitor admitting on record that the league is letting its brightest talent get beaten on purpose. And yet, silence from the top. No major suspensions. No serious fines. No public defense of Clark. The WNBA has brushed off every foul, every shove, every injury is just part of the game, while the very player fueling their record ratings is left to absorb the punishment, literally. This is why the claims of a hostile workplace hit so brutally hard, because it's no longer just rumor. The bruises are visible. The injuries are undeniable. And the league's refusal to act isn't just negligence. It looks like collusion. But as bad as the physical targeting was, it wasn't the only sign of something deeper. Because the politics stretched beyond the hardwood, all the way to the Olympic stage. If the constant hits on the court raised suspicion, the Olympic snub erased every doubt. Because what happened there wasn't about performance. It was pure politics. Leaked passages from veteran journalist Christine Brennan's upcoming book expose the truth. Caitlin Clark was never even considered for the Olympic squad. Not because she lacked talent. Her stats and impact screamed otherwise. But because the decision had been prearranged from the start. Her roster spot was sacrificed as a farewell tribute to Diana Taurasi, a legend of the game, yes, but player clearly past her prime. It wasn't about fielding the best possible team for the United States wasn't the priority. It was about protecting the veterans, rewarding loyalty, and shutting out the one player whose star power threatened to outshine them all. And the logic behind it was even uglier than the choice itself. Reports claimed officials were scared of the backlash if Clark made the roster but didn't get enough playing time. Let that sink in. Instead of risking her popularity overshadowing aging stars, they decided to leave her off completely. They didn't exclude her because she lacked ability. They excluded her because she was too good, too magnetic, too unstoppable. The message couldn't have been louder. This wasn't about fair competition. It was about control. When Clark's Indiana Fever coach, Christy Sides, broke the news, Clark didn't respond with outrage, and she didn't collapse in defeat. She offered a warning. She said simply, they woke a monster. That statement wasn't just defiance. It was prophecy, because the league's attempt to put her in her place only exposed how shaky their grip on power really was. And once that monster was awake, there was no way to silence it again. What followed proved exactly how much the WNBA relies on Clark, and how quickly the whole structure can crumble without her. For years, the league brushed off critics with the same excuse: we're still growing. Give us time. But the day Caitlin Clark entered the league, that excuse vanished, because the numbers told a story that no spin could hide. With Clark on the floor, the WNBA reached heights it had never touched before. Average viewership of her games, 1.81 million. Arena after arena sold out. Teams had to book bigger venues just to meet the demand. Jersey and merch sales exploded. For the first time in decades, the WNBA wasn't just background noise on the sports page. It was making national headlines. But the moment she was sidelined, everything collapsed. During the 10 games Clark missed with injuries, ratings didn't just slip, they nosedived, down 55%. Average viewership dropped to just 847,000. That's not a slump. That's a crash. The kind of crash that terrifies networks, advertisers, and sponsors. Here's the ugly truth. This league isn't staying afloat because of the WNBA brand. It's staying afloat because of Caitlin Clark. One player single-handedly carrying an entire organization on her back. The WNBA knows it. The broadcasters know it. Even her opponents know it. Yet instead of guarding her, instead of building the future of the league around the only star capable of taking it forward, they've treated her like a nuisance. A human ATM they can drain while never giving her the safety, respect, or influence she's earned. That isn't just short-sighted. It's suicidal. Because the numbers don't lie. Without Caitlin Clark, the WNBA isn't just weaker, it's irrelevant. And that's why her choice to walk away from the $1 million escape wasn't reckless at all. It was brilliant. Because in that instant, she proved her battle wasn't about chasing wealth. It was about something far bigger. She didn't abandon power. She created it. And that rejection set the stage for her most devastating move yet. On the surface, it looked insane. $1 million salary, equity in a fresh new league, freedom from the WNBA's toxic politics, and Caitlin Clark still said no. But the genius of that move wasn't what she turned down. It was in what she gained. Because that rejection was never about the paycheck. It was about leverage. By refusing Unrivaled's offer, Clark flipped the narrative overnight. She wasn't just another athlete chasing cash. She became the athlete willing to sacrifice millions to make a statement. And that statement cut right into the heart of the WNBA. The system is broken, and she refuses to play along. Think about how devastating that was for the league's image. For months, critics warned Clark was being used. For months, fans begged the league to treat her better. But none of it carried weight. Until she herself turned down $1 million payday. Only then did the story. It exploded. Suddenly, the mistreatment wasn't just rumor. It was undeniable. Because no athlete turns down that kind of fortune unless something much deeper is on the line. Her rejection transformed a quiet controversy into global headlines. It turned whispers about a hostile workplace into a thunderous roar the league could no longer dodge. And it gave real weight to demands for federal action. Because if Clark, the very face of the sport, was willing to burn millions just to prove a point, then the problem had to be real. In one move, she rewrote the whole story. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the executioner. She didn't just refuse Unrivaled's bait. She weaponized it, turning her own sacrifice into proof that the fight was never about her paycheck. It was about tearing down a corrupt system. And that's when Phase 2 began. Because the second Clark sparked a crisis, the WNBA Players Union saw their opening. The ripple effect from Clark's choice didn't end with the headlines. Her rejection of the Unrivaled deal created the perfect storm, and the Players Union pounced. For years, players had quietly complained about pay, conditions, and respect. But nothing ever shifted because the league always held the power. Contracts were locked in until 2027, and management knew players lacked the leverage to fight back. Until Caitlin Clark blew the doors wide open. Almost immediately after her rejection became a national story, the Players Union dropped a bombshell. They were opting out of the collective bargaining agreement early. A deal meant to stand for another 3 years was shredded with a single announcement. Union President Nneka Agwumike didn't bother softening the message. She called it a defining moment, making clear that players could no longer sit still. In other words, patience had expired. The gloves were off. And here's the twist. This wasn't random. It was coordinated. Clark's sacrifice handed the union the undeniable proof they needed to demand more. Now they could point straight at her story and say, look, if the league's biggest star, the one carrying all of us, is being exploited, then what chance do the rest of us have? It was the perfect weapon. The union turned Clark's defiance into a rallying cry, justifying their nuclear option. And in doing so, they triggered an existential crisis for the WNBA. Because without a collective bargaining agreement, the league's entire financial system is suddenly up for grabs. Revenue sharing, salary caps, endorsement rights, broadcast money, everything. The players weren't politely asking anymore. They were demanding. And just like that, the WNBA found itself crushed from both sides. Federal investigators circling on the outside, and a player rebellion boiling on the inside. The walls were closing in, and panic was spreading through league headquarters. For decades, the WNBA lived in a protected bubble, small, niche, and shielded from real accountability. But Caitlin Clark shattered that illusion. And now the league is cornered in a crisis of its own making. On one side, federal investigators are circling, armed with claims of a hostile workplace, possible civil rights violations, and evidence Clark was deliberately targeted. Subpoenas could drag out years of private emails, secret conversations, and policies the league never wanted exposed. If even half the whispers proved true, the cover-up might look worse than the abuse itself. On the other side, the players' union is prepared to go nuclear. By ripping up the collective bargaining deal, they've sent a message loud and clear. If the league refuses to give them their fair share, they'll shut the whole thing down. And that's not a negotiation tactic. That's a declaration of war. And caught in the middle is the very player the league tried to humble, now holding more power than anyone in its history. Caitlin Clark has shifted from the WNBA's golden goose to its greatest threat. The very system they designed to control her is now being torn apart by her. The panic inside league offices is real. Do they admit failure, finally shield their star, and beg for forgiveness? Or do they double down? Leaning on media allies to brand Clark is selfish, difficult, even a danger to the very game she's saving? Every option is a risk, and none of them are safe. Because the truth is out, the numbers are undeniable, and the public is watching closely. The league wanted Caitlin Clark to be their savior. Instead, by underestimating her, they may have created their own executioner. The WNBA thought it could keep Caitlin Clark under control. They thought they could profit from her star power, while trapping her in the same broken system every other player was forced to accept. But in trying to humble her, they awakened something they were never ready to face. Her rejection of the $1 million unrivaled offer wasn't an error. It was a masterstroke, a sacrifice that turned whispers into headlines, transformed quiet discontent into a player uprising, and forced the federal government to stare directly at the league's darkest secrets. Now, the WNBA stands at a crossroads. On one side, federal investigations that could uncover years of corruption and abuse. On the other, a union revolt demanding a total financial reset. And standing at the center is the one player they cannot silence, the one they need most, the one they try to break. Caitlin Clark didn't just refuse the bait. She sharpened it into a weapon, and that weapon could set fire to the entire system. The real question now isn't whether the WNBA can weather this storm. It's whether it can survive Caitlin Clark. Because the monster they woke is never going back to sleep.